And then the first little room was the holy place, and the one in the back was the Holy of Holies. Inside the Holy of Holies, the most holy place, was the Ark of the Covenant. Obviously, this is popularized today. You've watched Indiana Jones. No one really knows what this looked like, but people have speculated, according to the instructions that it has in the book of Exodus, on what it would have looked like. And so if you Google Ark of the Covenant, you'll get a lot of different pictures, and it's really fascinating to see people's imagination take off. But here's a picture of what it could have looked like. I wanted to point out that in Scripture you will hear the term mercy seat in connection to the Ark of the Covenant. The mercy seat was at the top of the Ark of the Covenant. There are two cherubim with wings, and these winged cherubim face each other. So I have another picture, and that comes in the form of another handout you have on the Ark of the Covenant. And so the two winged cherubim face one another, and their wings are kind of touching. And the mercy seat is the place in between the wings. And the Ark of the Covenant is really more than an ark. It's more than really an urn that held the Ten Commandments. It is, I want you to think of it as the throne of God. The mercy seat, which was this little area between the cherubim, is where the presence of God would come, and I don't know how you want to think of it, either sit or that's where it would be, is in the mercy seat. So I like to think of the Ark of the Covenant more than just a holding place, but as a throne of God here on earth. I like the picture of that. So this is also a handout that has more information on the Ark of the Covenant if you want to know. And then the other handout I want to point out is still Ark of the Covenant. It's 155 at the top of the page. The Ark of the Covenant, once the surrounding nations start to discover Israel and their religion, they kind of get a hint, oh, the Ark of the Covenant is really important to them. And what happens is they steal the Ark of the Covenant. And so this sheet kind of gives you an outline of where the Ark went, because at one point it wasn't even with the Israelites. It was with the surrounding nation that stole it. So especially in the book of Numbers, we're going to come back to this sheet, but that will talk about the Ark of the Covenant. Inside the Ark of the Covenant are several things. It says that inside the Ark of the Covenant are the stone tablets. The second set, remember, Moses broke the first set in his anger, and it says that God himself made another one and wrote in the handwriting of God on those tablets. So those two tablets are inside the Ark of the Covenant. In addition, I don't know if you can see this picture, the staff of Aaron, who was a high priest, the brother of Moses, is in the Ark of the Covenant. In addition, the third thing that's in the Ark of the Covenant is a sample of manna. Remember, we'll talk more about this when we get to the book of Numbers, but manna was the special bread-like sweet thing that God would make rain from heaven in order to feed his people while they were in the wilderness. So those three things are inside the Ark of the Covenant. The manna from heaven, the staff of Aaron, and the Ten Commandments. So that's the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is the only thing inside the Holy of Holies. The third thing in the tabernacle. Got it? Okay. Next is the table of bread. These are described in Scripture, so you can go back and read those if you want. But the table held the bread and the utensils used for the incense offerings. The bread is important because it reminded people of what? What is bread? Bread is everything in life. It's the sustenance of life. And it reminded the people that God provided everything that they needed, that God was himself the bread of life, which is what? So interesting, because Christ is the bread of life. everything here, it has immense connotations for the New Testament, which is to come. So that was what the table of bread was for. The table of bread was in the holy place, the second room in the tabernacle. The second thing that's in the holy place is the lampstand. For obvious purposes, it provided light for that room because that room was covered. It wasn't in the courtyard, it was covered, and so it probably was dark in there, and so they had the lampstand. Other than its practical purpose, the lampstand reminded people that God was the light that was going to light their way. They weren't home yet. These people were wandering in the desert, and to have the reminder that they had a guide, that they had a light that was going to guide them, was important. So that's the lampstand. The golden altar of incense was also in the holy place. I asked the class why they thought that that the Israelites would be using incense at this point in their worship. And they made a good point that the incense, not only was it fragrant, but it provided smoke. And the incense altar was practically lit all the time. And the smoke that rose up in the room and the fragrance that rose up in the room from the incense was a reminder of the eternal presence of God that was always with them. And I think it was fitting also that, you know, so many verses in the New Testament remind us of the fragrance of Christ, and then the fragrance of God stayed with them all the time. So that you have the altar of incense. So far in the Holy of Holies, there's the Ark of the Covenant. Then the next room is the holy place. The holy place has the incense, the table of bread, and the lampstand. Now we're going to move to the courtyard, which is outside of the tented area, but still within the tabernacle complex. In the courtyard, you have the brazen altar. The brazen altar was for animal sacrifices. In this time, in this society, this is Bible geeks have speculated that these people were receiving so many blessings from God that they felt like it would be good to offer God something in return. And the only thing they could do was offer anything that was of value to the people. Animals were very valuable to the people, and so to offer animal sacrifices at this point would be an incredible gift towards God. And also God commanded them to do this. The animal sacrifices were the offerings for sin offerings. Here at the beginning of it all, we see that blood is the price for wrongdoing. It always has been. Here's the beginning of where we see these blood offerings, and it is for the forgiveness of sins. The other thing that is in the courtyard is kind of a big bowl. It was called a laver, and it was a big bowl of water, and it was used by the priest in order to purify themselves, in order to go into the holy place and to pray. So a very practical piece of equipment, obviously a bowl with water, but teaching us a lot about the purity that they needed in order to see God, in order to encounter God. The last thing, I guess that's it. So in the courtyard there are also three things. The burnt offering, the brazen altar, that's the name of it. The brazen altar is the place where animal sacrifices, and the laver where they washed themselves and prepared for the sacrifices and to go into the temple. I feel like I'm missing one more thing that was in the holy place, or I'm sorry, the courtyard. Let's see if I can go back and find it. No, those are the only things in the courtyard. The altar of burnt offerings and the laver. Those were the only two things in the courtyard. Now, I want you to remember that the courtyard is also a part of the tabernacle. Although it was out in the open, It's kind of a complex, those three things, and there was kind of a wall that separated all of that from the rest of the camp around them. I wanted you to see this picture, and I hope that if you can't see it here, that you go into your papers and find this picture. The whole tabernacle is a sign of God's continued presence among His people. So here in this picture, what you have is the tabernacle in the middle, and then you have all of the tents of the Israelites around it. And they camped in groups by tribe. So over here, you probably have the tribe of Benjamin, and back here, you had the tribe of Manasseh, and they were camped by tribes. And then in the middle of their camp was the tabernacle. And I want to here get to Scripture and go to the very end of the book of Exodus. And it says, then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. This is when the tabernacle was completed. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled upon it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. In all the travels of the Israelites, whenever the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle, they would set out. But if the cloud did not lift, they did not set out until the day it lifted. So the cloud of the Lord was over the tabernacle by day, and the fire was in the cloud by night, in the sight of all of the house of Israel during all their travels. So this picture shows the tabernacle in the middle of all of the tents of the Israelites, and it shows the fire in the middle of the cloud, which was the presence of God, descending onto the Holy of Holies, supposedly inside onto the mercy seat, which was, remember, the very top of the Ark of the Covenant. And this passage almost gives me goosebumps because, you know, here we have God who has rescued His people out of slavery in Egypt. And they're not home yet, but He has provided such a way for them that even in knowing when to set out or when to stay where they are, God provided that in the way of this cloud. So the cloud was always on the tabernacle, which was his very presence, and everyone could see it. And when the cloud went up, when it disappeared, that meant, okay, pack it up, we got to move. And they would go on their way. So God even provided them with that, which to me is just absolutely incredible. So that is the end of Exodus. And now we have the book of Leviticus. And I asked the class who had ever read Leviticus word for word from beginning to end. And only one person had, and I don't blame them. It's a very boring book. It's very rote. It's very, you know, this is clean, this is unclean. Don't do this. A lot of just boring stuff. It's probably the most ignored book in the Bible, but it is so, so important. And I'm going to walk through it rather quickly. But the Exodus ended, obviously, with the construction of the tabernacle and with God descending over the tabernacle. The entire book of Leviticus tells us of the worship that is to take place inside the tabernacle and how the people really are to live in holy living. That's what the book of Leviticus is all about. I provided an outline for Leviticus, but I'm going to skip that now. The major themes of Leviticus are sacrifice and offering, worship, health, holiness, and obviously the Levites. And the Levites are who? They're the priests. They're from the tribe of Levi. And they're going to be the ones that are going to lead the people in their worship in the tabernacle. The most majorist theme of Leviticus is, let me get to that, how to maintain a relationship with this perfect God when we are imperfect beings. That's what Leviticus is truly, truly about. It's not about these little laws that it gives and these rules for living. It's really not about that. It's about these imperfect people who just came out of Egypt and they don't really know how to maintain a relationship with a God who is absolutely good and absolutely perfect. And that's what it's about. That's what Leviticus is about.